U.S. President Joe Biden and Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, say they have a deal to raise the debt ceiling. Now comes the hard sell. They have to persuade the rank-and-file lawmakers to back this in time to head off a government default. CGTN's Jim Spellman reports.
Over the weekend, Speaker of the House Republican Kevin McCarthy and U.S. President Joe Biden, a Democrat, say they've reached a deal in principle to raise the debt ceiling.
It takes the threat of catastrophic default off the table, protects our hard-earned and historic economic recovery, and the agreement also represents a compromise, which means no one got everything they want. But that's the responsibility of governing.
The deal raises the debt ceiling into 2025, past next year's elections. That was the president's primary goal. In exchange, Republicans secured caps on federal spending and expansion of work requirements for some social safety net programs. Not as much as Republicans had hoped for, but enough to brag about.
But I believe this is an agreement in principle that's worthy of the American people. It has historic reductions in spending, consequential reforms that will lift people out of poverty into the workforce, rein in government overreach. There are no new taxes, no new government programs.
Now each side must convince their own members to back the bill. The more extreme members of both parties have expressed skepticism, but the leaders hope to get the deal passed even if their members don't love it.
Overwhelmingly, Republicans in this conference are going to support the deal.
Passage is highly likely, I would put it that way.
Some analysts say once you get past all the drama, this has been an example of how Washington can productively function even in a highly partisan political time.
When you close the doors and get the principals in the room, there is still some capacity for the parties to reach decision.
The bill was released to lawmakers on Sunday evening. The House aims to vote on Wednesday following a mandatory 72-hour review period. The bill then moves on to the Senate. There's little room for error to get the measure to the president's desk before June 5th. That's when the U.S. will likely no longer be able to pay the bills and may go into default. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
Okay, so what comes next? And perhaps more importantly, what is at stake? To help unpack all of that for us, we're joined by Anthony Chan, former Chief Economist at J.P. Morgan Chase. Anthony, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming in this holiday here in the U.S.
Great to be here.
Let's talk a bit about the debt ceiling deal. And you have to think that calmer heads were going to come through in this in the end. Was there ever a moment that you thought they wouldn't get this done? And what's in this? What are some of the big takeaways?
I think the big takeaways is that you see people at both extremes, both on the left and in the right, that are very unhappy. And when I see things like that, it makes me feel as though it's probably a reasonable deal that meets middle America's desires. So I'm hoping that both Republicans and Democrats are aggressive at trying to get enough people to sign on so they can actually pass this legislation, because the option of defaulting is just so catastrophic that it can never happen.
Okay, so let's talk about more what's in this. No new taxes. That's an important thing for the Republicans. How are they going to pay for this, and what is it going to mean? Because it's my understanding federal spending is really going to be cut or be held very in place for the next couple of years.
Well, you're going to have caps for 2 years. The original House plan wanted to have spending caps for 10 years. So in a sense, some Republicans are upset because they're going to get spending caps for only a fraction of the years that they thought they were going to get. And of course, the Republicans are upset because they never wanted spending caps. So not too many people on the extreme right or extreme left are happy with this arrangement.
Okay, let's take a look at this. If indeed we do see bipartisan support, what's that going to mean to people across the United States who have seen such petty arguments really go on for the last decade or so?
Well, one of the things that you've seen during this turmoil is that mortgage rate spreads over the 10-year yield have gone up. And you might think that's esoteric, but it isn't. Because for an average family trying to buy a house and find a place for their family to live, and all of a sudden now they're paying higher mortgage rates, not so much because interest rates are higher, but because the risk perception is higher, and therefore the interest rate you have to pay on a mortgage is much, much higher. So this was something that actually hurt average people out there during this turmoil, and I'm glad that we're moving towards resolving it.
Okay, I want to talk about a couple of things close to Democrats and then close to Republicans. I'm going to start with the GOP. Let's talk about what it's going to mean for welfare in terms of getting money each month. So now people who can work have to work beyond the age of 50 to 54. However, homeless will still be able to receive their benefits.
Well, I think that that's a humanitarian gesture, and it's perhaps the right thing to do. But you got to keep in mind that when people talk about welfare, or they even talk about food stamps, they almost make it look like it's a huge handout and a big windfall for the poor. But the average meal money that you get on food stamps is $1.87 per meal. When is the last time anybody listening to this show was able to go out and buy dinner for $1.87, or lunch for $1.87, or even breakfast? These are not big windfalls. I'm not just saying that you shouldn't have people look for work and try to improve themselves.
Right.
But I never want to make anyone believe that these are huge windfalls that the people receiving these benefits are getting.
Okay, and secondly, for the Republicans, for the Democrats rather, a lot of frustration because the GOP raised the debt ceiling 3 times under Trump, and the national debt soared under him, and now the Republicans seemingly been pointing the finger at the Democrats. What about this?
Well, I think you're always going to see both parties trying to score points. Obviously, an opposition party does a lot better if the economy doesn't do well. And keep in mind that by restricting spending, you actually slow down GDP. And then the opposition party can easily say, oh, the economy is slowing down because the incumbent party is not managing the economy well. So you almost have that built in. But before we blame the Republicans for this, I think it's a tactic that both parties are certainly encouraged or incented to pursue.
You know, Anthony, thanks so much. One final point. Years ago, I lived on what amounted to food stamps for a month as a reporter, and I got to tell you, it was brutal. It was about $6 a day, so I agree with 1,000% about what you're saying. Thanks very much for your insight.
My pleasure.